Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much again for taking the time to join this study as we are studying and looking in kind of a non-deep way, but just in a basic way of the Hebrew language, trying to provide just a little bit of insight and to the tools that are there, and that hopefully you can pick up my enthusiasm for what a wonderful, beautiful language this is, and how there is so much depth and richness to it. And so, looking at your screen, you'll see we are in 1 Samuel chapter 18, picking up in the 18th verse. And just to give us a little bit of foundation here from last week, David had slain Goliath. A few lessons previously, and one of the prizes for this person who would slay Goliath was to be married to the daughter of the king. And so King Saul is kind of arranging this and was going to give his daughter Merab to be David's wife. And again, we don't know how old she was. We don't know how old David was. And again, we don't see any relationship basis here, no expression of love or commitment or anything. This was just a transaction, but David is taking it very seriously. And again, the whole thing of chivalry and of being honorable is what you see in this life of David. And by some of his answers here, were others who were less noble and less conscientious would have certainly handled things differently. And so to me, this is a pattern for us, as the Lord said that David was a man after his own heart. Here, what we see in these next few verses are some examples of how he handled this very interesting situation, very difficult for us to understand in 21st century mindset. But again, we know from history that this was a very common thing that was done. But yet there's two sides of the coin here. You have Saul, who is feeling threatened and actually has uh, given this woman, his daughter, to be to be David's wife, in the hopes that she will snare him and bring him down and cause him to eventually lose his life. So Saul has only the worst intentions in mind, but we'll see here that whether David knows about this or not, it's not evident. But by seeking to do God's will and seeking to walk nobly and seeking to walk humbly before God, we can see that God guides David, and I believe instructs him and protects him, because he's choosing the noble path and the righteous path. And that's the lesson here. So we get to verse 18. The Hebrew is not too challenging here. It's Bayomer David el Shaul, Mi Anochi. So he's saying, who am I? David is saying, and he's looking at his pedigree. He says, Mi chaye mishpachat of B Yisrael. So he's saying, my father doesn't have any money, my family's not rich, all leading into about the dowry and how to be worthy to be in the king's household. And so he says, this is all where my life is at. Ki eheyeh chatan lamelech, that I should be the son-in-law of the king. And so this is setting up for Saul's going to take advantage of this, we're going to find out. And now between verse 18, 17, 18, and 19 here, obviously some time passes. We don't know how much time, but the wedding does not take place. David doesn't have a dowry. Saul doesn't require anything. And for whatever happened, this girl, Merav, gets married off to someone else. So verse 19, Vayechi be'et tate et Merav bat Shaul LeDavid. So she was supposed to be given. I don't know how close to the wedding date it was. Maybe Merav is not willing. And here's where we're just going to look at the name a little bit. We see the mem, the resh and the vav. And those consonants, when you look them up in Bible Hub, they just say it's a woman's name. And so we have to get a little investigative and maybe a little creative here. And I'm sure Bible linguists would maybe not be so favorable of what we're going to do here, but we can break this apart. And if we would try to find out the meaning behind this name, we see that the mem can be assumed as being a preposition, ignore the vowel pointings and assume it as a preposition meaning from or like. And then the word or the word formed from the remaining two letters of resh and vav is rav, which is for many, which means a lot, excuse me, a lot of. So here we get an indication that Merav was from a lot of, or having, she was a substance girl. Maybe she was a material girl in modern day terms, that she liked her things and she was all about things. And she couldn't wait. And maybe she didn't like it that David wasn't rich, or that David wasn't famous. He was famous, but he had no money. And so maybe she kind of worked things out and said, I'm not going to marry that guy. She doesn't seem to have any feelings for him, but she obviously orchestrated or somehow got this situation to change, that she was then given to Adriel, a Hamhoth Lahite, Hamhothli. And so, she gets married away, and okay, wife is gone. That means that there's another problem here, because the king promised his daughter to David. But we see in verse 20 a new situation arises with Michal, translated as Michael or Mishal in English, but it's really Michal in Hebrew. And so we see in verse 20, V'te'ehav Michal Bashaul, and Michal loved David. And she was a daughter of Saul, and somehow this got around, that these feelings were known. Whether I don't know how this was brought about. Maybe she talked a lot about him, but she obviously was in love with David. And of course, this fit right into Saul's plans. We don't know if David knew her, and but somehow the servants told Saul that Michal was in love with David. And this thing made him happy. Vayagidu LeShaul Vayishar, and it pleased him. And in Hadavar, the word, Be'inav, it pleased him. So that you can just see Saul kind of wringing his hands, saying, "Oh yes, my trap is coming into place here. My bait is here. This is going to work out anyway." And so, and you think this poor girl, Michal, is just the pawn in the midst of this. She has no idea what her conniving father is trying to do. Now, I want, just like we looked up Merav's name, I wanted to look up Michal's name. And when we click on this and look it up, unfortunately, Bible Hub just says, oh, it's wife of David. It's a proper name. And it says it's an uncertain derivation. We don't know where it came from. Well, we have more tools at our disposal. We can't give up that easy. So again, using these same kind of linguistic or tools here, that we can look at these consonants and vowels that are there. And if we assume that the mem is again a preposition meaning from, it can tell us a little bit maybe about where her name came from. So that leaves us with three consonants. Every Hebrew word has a tri-consonantal. Some have two, maybe some will say have four, but basically there's three consonants that comprise the root of every Hebrew word. And so because Aramaic is somewhat the foundational sister language, influenced by, tied together with, depends upon which Bible scholar you talk to, they match together. So we can look at the dictionary of the Targumim and look up the Yud, Kaf, and the Lamed, and we come up with something that is capable or being able to sustain, to be enduring. It shows that maybe that she had a strong will, that she had a desire here, that she obviously loved David. There's not many places in the Bible where it gives any indication that love mattered much other than loving God. And you don't see a lot of love expressed between men and women. It's just is not written down much. So for her to express that she loved David, um, she must have been trying to work something here to get her will known and to be enduring to make this come to pass, saying, okay, my opportunity is here. I love David. I want to be his wife. And she's pushing herself and promoting herself. And so maybe that gives us a little indication of her name, and it's from being able to promote yourself, from being able to have some initiative and some motivation here. And so maybe that's helps us to understand her personality a little bit. And so the voices in the castle, in the court, was no castle yet, but in this wherever King Saul lived, secrets were well known, and the gossip was flying around here. And so they told Saul, it pleased him. And so we get to verse 21, and he says, Vayomer Shaul et Nina lo um, utehi lo. So I will, and then of course the last word to finish this off is the key word here, which is lemokesh. I will give her to him that she may be a snare to him. Again, what a dad, huh? What a guy. Um, Using his daughter in an evil way to cause the demise of his future son-in-law, all the while pretending, oh yeah, I love my family, I love this guy, I love my country, and really just wanting to love himself and protect himself. Because remember, God's presence has been taken away from him, and God's favor was upon David. And normally when those things happen, the people who are jealous, the people who are out of the will of God, will go to incredibly cruel measures to protect themselves and to try to gain back what they have lost. And we see this happening here with Saul and David. And so he hopes she'll be a snare to him. Um, Utahivo and Yad Philistine. So he wants the Philistines to do his dirty work for him, and he's going to try to get David to go into dangerous places so that he'll die in battle. Kind of interesting if you think ahead that this is similar to what David did to um, Uriah the Hittite after he committed adultery with Bathsheba, the guy's wife, that he then sent Uriah into the battle so that he could die in the battle. Obviously, this was a tactic learned from somewhere and repeated. So, and then he said, Vayomer Shaul el David Bishtachim. The second time, Tichachtain be Hayom. And so he's saying, okay, maybe we're going to give this a try again. You can be my son-in-law the second time. Some translations say between the two, between either daughter, eventually you're going to be my son-in-law. Kind of an interesting little twist here. But the key underlying component behind this is Saul wants David to die, and he wants to do whatever he can to trick him into getting this to happen. And you wonder, how can this be just from a marriage, just from his wife, who's the daughter of Saul? How is this going to occur? And you'll have to come back next week, and we'll find out as we go into verse 22 and so forth, and see what kind of plan Saul works up to cause David's demise. So God bless you. Thank you so much for joining this. I hope that you're encouraged and strengthened, and see just what a beautiful depth and richness God's word has. And so thankful that God has given us his word that we can learn and study. So until next time, God bless you, and see you then. Bye-bye.